Hey, what's up? This is Sam from Dream River Designs, and I'm back with another build video. Today I'm building a computer desk with 3 really beautiful walnut slabs. I hope you enjoy. First thing to do is prepare the slab. I am cutting it down not quite to length, but almost. You can see with the wobble there that it's definitely not flat, and this surfacing table will allow me to flatten it. Gets it down to about 1.5 inches thick. Now that the slab is surfaced, I know that it's flat and I can remove the bark now. You need to get rid of all the bark in order for epoxy to adhere to your slab. Here you see I'm cleaning up the edges to ensure that the epoxy bonds to the slab. Once the slab is prepared, then I can start making my mold to fill with epoxy. To prevent any leaks, I use caulk on all the joints for the mold. You can see here I almost forgot the mold release. If you forget the mold release, your slab will adhere to the melamine below and you'll have a hell of a time getting it unstuck. Before you do the actual epoxy pour, you should seal your slab and let that dry. This prevents air from escaping, and it also prevents the liquid black dye from seeping into the walnut. Let it dry, and then you can do the actual pour. Now that it's gotten wet while it's been surfaced, you can start to see the beautiful grain figure. And it's exciting when you can see this because it's just such a gorgeous piece of wood. Here's the pour. So as you can see, the epoxy is a little short. I screwed up my calculations and ended up short about 2 gallons of epoxy. It's not the end of the world. I just poured, mixed again and poured again. But in the meantime, in the middle, you can scuff it up real good to ensure a mechanical bond. And here's the second pour. This is after the epoxy is cured for probably about 2 or 3 weeks. It came up nicely from the mold because I remembered to use mold release. And then we do the surfacing process once more. Shim it so that it doesn't wobble at all, and then glue it down with hot glue. Took a long time and it created a lot of dust. Once the table has been surfaced, then we can clean up the edges with the track saw. At the time I didn't have 2 tracks and my track wasn't long enough, so I used that straight edge there to keep it in the same place because I have to move the track and make 2 cuts. Now I'm starting to build the cabinets. These are walnut cabinets made out of walnut lumber, and they're going to be joined with a miter. And I try to do like a waterfall miter where the grain is continuously wrapped around the cabinet. I didn't quite succeed at that, but I got pretty close. First thing to do when you're working with any lumber is to joint it, get a flat surface on one side, and then send it through the planer. And once it's all square and flat, then you can really start working with it. The planer gets the side opposite the jointed face exactly parallel, so you have a flat and straight board. Then you go back to the jointer to get a straight edge. Last thing to do with the boards before we glue them is to cut them to their final width on the table saw. And then I do send them back through the planer one more time. So I guess it's not quite the final width on the table saw, but my table saw is not great and it doesn't leave a super square edge. So I usually finish up my boards in the planer. Here you can see I'm determining the configuration of one of the cabinets. The 3 short boards in the middle, the 4 short boards in the middle are going to comprise the top of the cabinet, and then the boards on the outer sides are the sides of the cabinet. And like I said, I tried to have continuous grain wrapped continuously around the cabinet. You can see here I'm finding that. And here's the glue up. First I glue up all 4 boards here to make panels, and then eventually I'll cut the panels with miter joints and glue them into a square box. So this is a friend of mine, his wood shop, and he has a drum sander that he graciously let me use. And I ran all my panels through there. It got rid of all the excess glue squeeze out, but it also ensured that they were fairly flat. I think it saved me some random orbital sanding time. But actually, I don't think his drum sander was configured quite perfectly, and so that's why you see those wiggly marks. Those are burns. And those actually took me quite a while to sand out. So I'm not sure if I ended up saving time in the end or not. Here I'm cutting the panels to close to their final width before I cut the miters. The panels were not perfectly flat, and so these miters ended up being really bad. I had to kind of brute force them, as you'll see in a minute. I'm using 2 strap clamps on either end, and then traditional wood clamps anywhere that I can find a place to put them. I wanted to reinforce the miters, and I thought about how to do that, and the only thing I could come up with is dowels. It's probably not the best way. I'm sure there's a million other ways. Usually with picture frames, I'll do splines, but I just couldn't think of how to easily do that with these cabinets. So I just drilled dowels. So there's 2 cabinets, and one of the cabinets has 4 boards, this one, so I drilled 4 holes. The other cabinet only has 3 boards that are wider, so I drilled 3 holes for that one. As you can see, my miters leave something to be desired, so I fill that up with wood glue and sawdust. Ended up having some leftover white oak from a dining table that I built, and I was happy to be able to use that. I used it to build the drawer boxes. There's going to be 3 drawers in one of the cabinets. So here I'm milling the white oak, and then I resawed it to get 2 panels out of each board. And you just sand forever and get them all smooth.
したいとって読み直しているって読み直しているだけが出た
Decided to use rabbet joints to build these drawer boxes because it's easy. Here you can see I'm gluing up the drawer boxes, gluing the rabbet joints, making sure that they're square, and then I cut a dado to insert the plywood for the drawer bottom. And it fit quite nicely. Because my cabinet boxes were not great, they're not square, and so I had to make a template for the drawer fronts, and that's that piece of particle board. It looks like a rectangle, but it's an irregular shape, and so I used that to trace the irregular shape onto my slab, and then I used the track saw to cut it out. I ended up with what looks like a rectangle, but should match my opening. And then I cut it into thirds because there's going to be 3 drawers. I didn't want to put drawer pulls on these because I thought it was a really beautiful slab and I didn't want to cover it up. I'm using push to open drawer slides and I think they worked really well. I had a lot of trouble getting the drawer fronts to sit exactly where they were supposed to be, and so I did this process over and over and over, moving the drawer slides a little bit each time until I got it perfect. And then this is the third slab of walnut that I'm using. This will face the second cabinet, and it will be a door, and so it will remain as one piece. Again, I did not have a perfect rectangle on my cabinet, and so I cut a template that's an irregular shape, and then I used that to cut my slab into that shape. I'm using a flush trim router bit, so the ball bearing references the piece on top, and it should cut the exact shape that I want. And now we're back to the desktop. This is just sanding up through the grits. Draw a line and make sure that you get rid of all the pencil marks, and then you know you're done with that grit. I think I sanded up to 320 on this desktop. And after I've cleaned the dust off, this is the finishing process. On this build, I used Osmo Pollux oil, and I thought it was great. I like this stuff a lot. I ended up doing like 3 or 4 coats, but you really only need to do 2. You flood the space and then get rid of the excess. Finally, you finish with a buffing pad. This is the surface after 1 coat of Osmo oil. Now I'm building the feet for the cabinets. I need the cabinets to sit about 3 inches off the ground. Here I'm cutting a decorative chamfer on the feet in the absolute worst way I could think of. This joint was a little bit loose, but it's not really load bearing, just the entire desk is going to sit on it, so I don't think it's that big of a deal. Once I got it in place with the shims, I marked on the side where the hinges should go, and then I used this hinge template to find where to drill my holes. Use a Forstner bit to hog out most of the material, and then I use chisels for the rest. Hinges ended up fitting nicely. And we do the same process on the cabinet itself. I wanted the desktop to float off the cabinets about 3 inches, and I thought about different ways to doing that, finally arriving just at dowels. And so the desktop will sit on 4 dowels that sit on top of the cabinets. I didn't have walnut dowels, but I did find these really cool poplar, or it was actually just one poplar dowel that I found at Menards. Poplar is usually a light colored wood, but every now and then you find like this really dark green poplar, and so I thought it worked well. I cut them in the worst way I could think of with a handsaw. I think it was because everybody was asleep and I didn't want to start the miter saw up. But of course it wasn't a straight cut, and so my dowels were a little bit crooked. Nobody will know. And we're on to the finishing process. I used the same oil that I used on top to do the drawer fronts, the cabinets, and the door front. This is a hard wax oil. You wipe it on, wipe it off. It's super easy to apply, and I think that it looks really, really good. It gives a nice sheen, but it also lets you still feel the wood grain and be close to the wood. Last piece here is using the oil on the feet. Once I'm done with this, the build will be ready for assembly. Thank you for watching. I'd love to build a piece of furniture like this for your home. If you're interested, please message me. This is Sam from Dream River Designs, and here's the final piece.